Welcome villagers, to the village hidden in the stories. I am your guide, Kage, and today we have part 2 of What If Naruto Was in Ben 10. As always, stories are made by me, and I hope you like the video. Please subscribe to help me grow. Without further ado, let's get into this amazing story. Part 2, A True Team. Naruto, Ben and Gwen still sat at the top of a building, staring down at a warehouse that was going to be a meet-up for 2 parties in alien tech. It still had been a cold night, darkness and wisps of cold streets through the small town of Bellwood, and even the smell of sewage water filled the air around the new team. Naruto stared with a concentrated look, aware and ready to jump to action at any second. He had already failed in his first task of helping Max, and as he thought of such a thing he clenched his fist a bit, not noticing the watching eyes from behind. He didn't even want to think about what would happen if he failed. Sure, Azimuth wouldn't blame him for anything, but it sure as hell would get the planet of Earth destroyed in one summer. "Are you okay?" rang out a voice behind the blonde. Naruto shifted a bit at the caring tone. He then turned to where the voice came from, softening his look at the cousins. "I'm fine," Naruto responded to Gwen, giving a reassuring grin when speaking. While Gwen still didn't trust the blonde, the sorrowful feeling that he was exuding was unbearable, enough to make her question what was going on with the blonde. With a bit of caring worry, she quickly decided the best way to help is to take the boy's mind off of whatever he was thinking on, even if she didn't know or understand his exact motives. "You told us about why you're here, but you never told us about you. You know about me and Ben from files that Azimuth gave you, but..." Naruto's grin faded a bit, turning it to a small broken smile before shifting to a bright one. He could feel the stress in his throat, clumping saliva in his neck, a feeling that felt suffocating, not wanting to think about the dooming Earth, but he didn't want to talk about his past either. But as he thought of it, talking about some of the good times in his life would help him. He didn't need to tell them about everything, and really if they were going to work together on finding Max he would need to tell them a bit of his skills. "I guess that's fine," he expressed, gaining a small smile before sitting down on the edge of the building, letting his legs flail down, free from his control as he felt the air on his face calming him a bit. "My planet isn't that different from this world's feudal Japan," he said calmly, reminiscing his shinobi days. Ben turned to the two at this with an interested smile. "You mean like, with ninjas and samurai and stuff?" he asked with a focused and skeptical tone. Naruto just gave a short nod. He didn't like the Western depiction of kunoichi and shinobi, but it would help with him explaining a bit of the past he would tell. "However, I prefer the term shinobi, and we aren't like how this side of the world sees us. Whether that's because I'm from a different planet or not I do not know. My life was very different from what I know ninjas are like on Earth. While we are technically sneaky freelance workers who care for the mission, we never wore anything like black onesies. Some might have worn some, but most didn't." Naruto shivered a bit at remembering who he was talking about. The green track suits still laid clear in his mind, making him shudder for a second. But shinobi were also respected, had moral codes, and the will of fire, at least in my village, that is. Ever since I was little I wanted to be a shinobi, and that's what I did, like most everyone in my village, only, I was able to break the mold while others stayed behind. Naruto chuckled at his words a bit before giving a noticeable sigh. "And what happened?" asked Gwen, a blank worried look streaked across her face, feeling the boy's sorrowful feeling coming back in an instant. Naruto shuddered again with a small silent pause, only this time for a different reason as he remembered his past just a bit more. "I mean, you said Azimuth saved you from a dying planet, so..." Gwen pressed again, a bit too interested to leave it alone. She really had to know what happened as her curiosity started to peak. Curiosity soon filled Ben just like his cousin. With a blank look he focused on Naruto, who seemed to shift just a bit more, his feeling of sadness and remembrance filling the air, making the pressure palpable. The blonde didn't know what to say. He remembered his past clear as day, all that happened. It was on him, but sharing it, maybe he thought it was just a bit weak. Or maybe he still remembered the looks and words too vividly, or maybe it was the fact the two cousins reminded him of Konohamaru and Sakura a bit too much. He didn't know why, but living through it again would be the worst thing he could do right now. Something terrible happened to my world, he said, his voice and chest tensing up with more hurt and memories of the past that he hadn't let out in a while. I partly think what happened was because of me, he continued, his voice becoming more calm the more he spoke. The blonde then looked to his hands, and as he looked he could see blood on them, although only he could. His words shook Ben and Gwen a bit, and seeing as Naruto wasn't elaborating what happened, they could tell it was bad. Although they couldn't see his face, they knew they couldn't press on. The feeling in the air clearly pressed against such an act. The story he wasn't telling would have probably caused anyone the same pain, and even now Gwen and Ben could feel the reluctance from the boy. No matter how I treated the two, where they couldn't press on, and when looking towards each other they could tell that the blonde wasn't ready to fully explain himself. It just wasn't the right time for such a thing. But I guess I'm okay with it, Naruto started, his tone lighting a great amount as he looked off into the black sky ahead of him, and the cousins looked towards him with questions in their eyes. I know you two could feel the feelings I was giving off, but I've thought on this multiple times. Each time I realize I wouldn't change what happened. The whiskered blonde gave a quick pause, clenching his fist that he once found bloody. In his eyes they changed back to normal. And from all of that, I know I can't let what happened to my world happen to yours, no matter what. That's why I even accepted the mission in the first place. Ben and Game's eyes softened, one with a smile, and the other with a goofy grin. The feeling in the air that was once sorrowful lightened up, as even with the cousins not knowing the shinobi, but this was the moment they knew they could trust him. Wait, I just realized, since your world is like our feudal Japan, does that mean your name means fish cake? Gwen asked with a light-hearted look and a joking tone. Ben struggled to keep in his laugh, while Naruto almost fell flat from surprise. While I prefer the other meaning of my name, I guess you could use it like that, he said with a strained tone, remembering some past jokes that were made with his name. Never took you for a seafood dish, Naruto, Ben said in the same joking tone as Gwen with a bright smile. Liking the idea of annoying their new teammate, Naruto quickly recovered with a slight smirk. He then crossed his arms. Fish cake is something you put in ramen, so at least I'm a snack. Ben quickly deadpanned at this. Plus I don't care how it's used, if you guys want to say it like that I'm fine either way. Okay, fish cake, expressed Gwen with a small smile. She was happy she was able to get his mind off of whatever he was thinking on. Soon the laughs and chuckles from the team died, interrupted by sounds of cars rolling towards them. They're here, expressed Ben with a serious look. The three quickly went to the edge of the building to see exactly what was going on, as it seemed like the reason they were waiting had finally showed themselves. Two trucks pulled up, engines blaring as black smoke unvaryingly and slightly went into the air. The smoke faded as it got higher, keeping the three's attention on the moving trucks. The two sets of lights shined at each other, their flicker almost annoying as both seemed to be broken. The same flickers brightened the small part of the factory with a mechanical ray that only covered a bit of the road, but as fast as the lights had arrived they disappeared. Darkness rushed back as the cold seemed to be a second thought. However, now the abyss was clearly filled by two vehicles. Not long after did the engines that were once so loud go out, and sudden silence was deafening as nothing made a sound for a few short seconds. The only thing still left in the air by the trucks was anticipation, as well as the smell of gas that overlapped the smell of sewage. And now, the air felt heavier than it had before. All three had to keep watch. They couldn't miss a second of what was going on, just in case something was to happen. A few seconds after both trucks had turned off, two groups of people walked out of them. The groups looked to each other for a second with no interest, only silent understanding before both turned to the opening ahead of them. The opening was filled with crates and shipping containers, obviously for supplies for the factories, but it didn't seem like they were looking at those. No, they were waiting on something, or was it someone? Soon, another sound of an engine came clear to the team, as it seemed like a third party was about to arrive, with green bright lights that shine just a bit more than the trucks. A green car with black stripes pulled into the clearing. its bright headlights cutting through the darkness as it effortlessly claimed the space between the trucks. The car skidded to a stop that kicked up a bit of dust. The door on the driver's side opened slowly and calmly, allowing someone to step out. The figure let its foot stomp the ground, kicking up dust unnoticeably, and allowing the car to spring up as it lost the weight it once had. A boy that seemed to be the same age as Naruto walked out. The boy had black hair with a calm smirk. He was framed with a muscly figure. A black basic shirt covered his form, and gray long sleeves went beyond the shirt's short ones. He held the side of the door as he looked to the two trucks, keeping his smirk. The smirk seemed sinister, with a feeling of dread and want. This was before he closed the door, and walked towards the two groups that had once rode in the vehicles. With the cousins' eyes widening and mouths agape, they wondered and gawked at the boy who seemed to gravitate towards the two groups. "That's Kevin," whispered Gwen Cat, high a breath in her throat, low enough so the groups wouldn't hear, but loud enough so that Naruto would. The redhead's eyes stayed locked on Kevin, a sense of worry in her eyes before flashes of memories went through her mind, of how he and Ben were friends for a short time before the boy turned out to be crazy, of how Kevin turned into an amalgamation of Ben's aliens. That even came back a couple of times to kill the brunette every so often. "You know him?" asked Naruto with indifference. He crossed his arms as he noticed Gwen was in her own world. The blonde then blankly stared back to this so-called Kevin. A bored look flashed in his eyes as he wondered why the girl was so worried. "Kevin Levin, he's got superpowers," Ben added as he watched the boy a bit in remembrance. More soon his eyes slanted with a grumble, before crossing his arms similar to Naruto. "I fought him all the time when we were kids," the brunette went on, having similar flashes of memories like Gwen, not liking the idea of dealing with a raging monster. Gwen shifted finally, finding herself as she looked towards Naruto. "He ended up trapped in the null void, a kinda extra-dimensional jail," said Gwen with the same quiet tone, only now it was less worried and more cautious as she gestured towards Kevin. Naruto turned to the girl absently before turning back to look down at the scene. "Yeah, I know about the space jail," he responded quickly, boredom still coming out of his voice as he looked on and waited. He watched as Kevin confidently stood in front of the two groups. He was now holding a breath case, a confident smirk still over his face before he opened it. The case was filled with stacks of hundreds, possibly more than 500,000. "Money's here," Kevin said slyly. His smirk deepened as chuckle escaped from his mouth. He closed the case and looked back to the two groups. The first group gave smirks towards each other, as the second seemed a bit silent. Kevin watched as seemingly his group unloaded their truck, bringing more cases out towards Kevin and the other group. Naruto's eyes narrowed at this, his serious look strained as he watched the boy clearly taking lead in the deal. He wanted to know what the black-haired boy was selling. The blonde knew it had to be serious if the case had that much money in it. "Seems like your old friend is brokering the deal," said Naruto cautiously, now seeing why Gwen had that worried look from before. Ben turned to him quickly. "Why not? You said it was illegal," expressed Ben slyly, a noticeable smirk on his face as he gestured to Kevin. Quickly the two looked back to the exchange, and not long after were one of the cases that had been brought to Kevin opened while handing the case full of money back to the group leader. The black-haired teen smirk still was unwavering. He reached into the case and pulled out lance-like weapon that stopped about 4 inches away from the handle. He looked to it with a glint, holding it up with a bit of pride. "As promised, 4 dozen-factor new laser lances." Kevin shifted a bit before turning to the shipping containers. "Etherpoint energy module," he continued, dropping his other arm as he still held the device up. "Antenna focus emitter," he went on before walking near the shipping containers, turning his back towards the groups as he held the weapon forward as if he was going to test it. "It's good for 35 minutes of continuous fire at 0.06 terawatts. Is that good?" he asked, his smirk soon turning into a grin. A shift of danger flowed in the air as the boy pointed the thing at a far container in front of him. Naruto watched Grin closely as he sensed something sinister bubbling up inside the boy. The danger in the air grew as the blob knew something was about to happen. and then with minimal concern the black-haired boy fired. The tip of the lance shot out a small thin continuous red beam. A glow of light came from the tip as the beam traveled towards the container. The beam met its target in a quick fashion. A small futuristic hum came from the weapon as the container started to visibly heat up. An eerie glow surrounded the shining container. As Kevin didn't move from his spot or grin, and once the beam subsided, the container blew. It went up in flames of fiery blaze. The heat was able to travel back all the way towards Ben, Gwen and Naruto, but the sudden warmth was overshadowed by Naruto's glare intensifying, as some debris landed on the street. Kevin turned back to the group, his smirk telling as he wanted to see their reactions. "You tell me," he said confidently, finishing the rhetorical question he had before. Although as he looked, the group he was trying to sell to seemed indifferent, but somehow he could tell they would buy the weapons. Naruto's glare narrowed at the flame-covered container, then shifted towards Kevin with a sharp intake of air. The shockwave of heat covered his face. He stayed unaffected as he tried to run down what to do in his head. He stayed calm, no visible shift or panic in his eyes, just a blank intense look. "Show off," he muttered under his breath, his voice too silently to be noticed by his team. However, it was still dripping with disappointment and boredom, as his cold concentrated look stayed on Kevin. He knew this was bad now. That was level 5 tech on a level 2 planet. Even if the leveling system of plumbers seemed a bit off, a 3-level jump was still huge, something that dangerous wasn't meant to be here, which put way more questions in the air than answers. The blonde knew his best option now was to wait. He needed more information about this whole deal, about the tech, and most importantly, about Kevin. Without breaking his stare, Naruto whispered out to the cousins, "Watch and listen closely. We need more info, but we could be to act at any moment," said the blonde with a sense of leadership and control. The two quickly nodded before turning back to Kevin and the groups. Watching as they conversed, the trio watched closely as the deal went on. Each side moving. Kevin's side began to unload their truck and load the other group's truck, while Kevin himself sat back and counted the money greedily. The only problem with them watching was the fact that every so often Ben was edging toward the edge of the building, like Naruto. However, he didn't notice as he kept moving and soon fell directly in the middle of the groups. As Ben tumbled from the roof and hit the ground with a thud, he took the attention of both groups. Naruto and Gwen, still standing high on the roof, widened their eyes at the mishap. Both groups snapped their heads toward him, and a heavy silence fell over the area. The sharp sound of Ben's fall echoed, making it impossible for him to go unnoticed. Kevin's confident smirk twisted into a frown of surprise, and then irritation, as he stood up from counting the money. Both groups involved in the deal exchanged suspicious glances at the boy, not noticing Naruto and Gwen still on the roof. Well, look who decided to drop in," Kevin sneered, his eyes narrowing as he recognized Ben. He stepped forward, crossing his arms. "You always did have the worst timing, Tennyson." Naruto's expression quickly returned to its calm, assessing state. He exhaled a sigh, realizing things had escalated much faster than expected. Gwen, still hidden on the rooftop with him, tensed as she glanced down at Ben. "This is bad," Gwen whispered, her eyes filled with concern. "They're going to attack him." Naruto shifted his weight, his sharp gaze scanning both groups below. "Yeah, but that's why you always gotta have a plan." Gwen started to move forward, ready to jump after her cousin. She was soon stopped by Naruto's arm stretched out in front of her. "What are you doing?" the girl asked, still in a whisper as her eyes narrowed at the blonde. She didn't need this now. Ben was in trouble, and the boy was trying to stop her. Naruto noticed the look in the girl's eyes. She was ready to jump down after Ben without regard for the situation, something he couldn't let happen. "Listen, we can't just act. Right now, we need an advantage, or we're toast. If anything happens, I'll jump down to save Ben, but you have to stay up here and give us some cover. Do you think you can do that? Gwen's lips curled into a frown as she looked back and forth between Ben and Naruto. She soon gave in with a sigh. After this, she gave Naruto a nod and stepped back, readying herself with pink energy. Ben held his hands up as the groups approached him slowly. "Hey, Kevin, don't think you could tell your buddies to let me go?" he asked with a strained smirk, keeping his joking tone as Kevin watched. "They aren't really my buddies. It's more like I'm working with these dorks to make a few bucks. Plus, I gotta keep counting this money, so I'll let them handle you." Ben grit his teeth as he watched the two groups come closer. The brunette straightened, getting himself ready. He knew he could handle these guys. It was going to be easy. "Right?" Ben lifted his left arm, the same one with the Omnitrix on it, and pressed a button, making the dial pop up as Naruto kept his eye on it expectantly. "It's hero time!" Ben yelled. His voice stretched through the factory, loud and powerful enough to reach Kevin, but it was still only able to go that far. With that, Ben slammed his hand down on the watch, expecting a large green flash followed by a split second of blissful nothing. Only, this wasn't what happened. Ben had closed his eyes with expectation, but feeling no light, he opened them slightly. It took him a few seconds to realize nothing had happened. No flash, no change, no super strength, no flame-like body. He was just himself. The one change he did notice was how the Omnitrix had turned blue, but that was it. He slapped it again, only for the same result as before. He expressed, worry evident in his tone. When he looked back at the groups, some of them had smirks, while others began to take off their robes or face-like masks. Suddenly, everyone had either changed into a knight with an infinity symbol on their belt or an alien similar to the yellow one that had attacked him when he first tried to find Max. This caused everyone's eyes to widen, except the two groups. Even Kevin's eyes widened, though only Naruto noticed such a thing. Ben and Gwen quickly remembered the knights. They were forever knights, a group that wanted high-tech weapons and other things to kill all aliens. It made sense why they would be here. But what they didn't understand was why the yellow aliens were the ones selling the weapons. Ben was stunned. He didn't know what to do, sheer shock freezing him in place as it looked like he was going to be attacked, or worse. With stomps and shuffles, the boy was surrounded. Sounds of noises alien to him, as well as the clunking of metal, reached his ears. The shine of metal flashed in his eyes. While slimy yellow skin inched closer, expelling tentacles, every second they inched closer, Gwen's glare worsened. Her cousin was in danger, and she had been told to stay back, but she hadn't noticed as Naruto began to step forward, his look hardened with calm overtone, his eyes focused on one knight in particular, raising his sword as if ready to take down Ben with one swing, and when that swing went flying, the blonde acted with one thought: now. He would act now. He had finally figured out what to do. He may have cut his analysis short, but that didn't mean he didn't have a plan. No, with his new eyes, he was able to find what he needed. He knew exactly what to do, and as if he had all the control in the world. He shifted down with a calm smirk. In a split second, he disappeared from Gwen's sight and reappeared beside Ben, stopping the incoming sword with an open smile. "Sorry for leaving you here for so long," Naruto said with a chuckle. Ben, still clearly frozen and in shock, looked at him, but a small smile reassured the blonde that Ben had heard. Naruto clenched the blade in his hand. He could tell the metal was sharp, but it couldn't even damage the glove on his hand. In fact, the sleek, sharp blade felt dull and decrepit to him. With a masked surprised look the knight stared towards Naruto. He tried using all of his strength to take his blade away from the blonde, but nothing had worked. Every so often the knight would pull, making Naruto give a disappointed sigh before staring at the knight with his purple eyes. "Listen up, by order of the plumbers, this operation is going down. I will give you all a chance to surrender, or else. The blondes reached each ear of his assailants. His voice was calm and concentrated. While his words were dark and sure of action, the Forever Knights will do what is needed for our mission, you will not stop us, the knight that had his blades held by Naruto said, his voice seemingly of noble descent. The whiskered blonde just cocked his head to the side, before looking to the other knights and aliens. He held a questioning look before his calm and serious one came back at full force. This put fear into the knights as he tried and failed to pull his sword away from Naruto. Does this guy speak for you all? The shinobi questioned, keeping his look hidden as he waited for an answer. Not long after did nods appear and the boy's enemies give nods. Even the aliens that held the tentacles ready nodded as well. Naruto gave a small smirk before staring right at the knight in front of him. The blonde held a giant grin with a ready stare. His hands clenched the hard metal with force as a worried look could be seen under the knight's mask. The blonde crushed blade in his hands with minimal effort. The metal had shattered like glass, and made small but still sharp sounds when landing on the floor. Surprised looks could be seen under the masks of the Forever Knights as Naruto opened and closed his hand. A knight started. Another knight began. That boy broke a blade with his bare hands. A final knight finished, showing a surprised tone that mirrored his comrades. Yeah, you can all be surprised after a kick your asses. Naruto's words were accented by him punching his open palm with his other hand. He then slightly turned to Ben with a clear smirk of wonder. He knew he could take down each and every one of their attackers, but doing this alone wasn't necessarily fun, at least not to him. He also wanted to see exactly what had stopped Ben from transforming. As he and everyone here had noticed his struggle, with a commanding tone the blonde gave a yell. Gwen, stay ready, he started, still looking towards Ben, not looking to Gwen who had gave a nod with her pink energy glowing brighter. Ben, Naruto continued with the same commanding tone. He shifted his body into a fighting stance to get ready for the knights and aliens who had decided to approach again. You gonna help out, or are me and Gwen gonna have all the fun? Ben stood up finally steadying himself. He stumbled a bit but he was able to get into a strained fighting stance. The Omnitrix is in some recalibrating state. I think, I may not be able to use it but I can still fight, Ben said with confidence as he looked to the aliens and the knights. Naruto gave a nod to Ben still having a grin as he made a hand sign. Good, the blonde started. He kept his eyes towards the Forever Knights as he spoke. The Forever Knights' armor is gonna be hard for you to get past. But there are multiple cracks and crevices that you can use to attack. With them I say use speed and agility, don't get hit. Oh, and for the aliens, I suggest keeping close range. The small mouth where the tentacles sprout out is an obvious weak point. Ben gave a slight nod. His face then turned from joking to serious as he concentrated on the two groups turned assailants. Enough talk, roared a knight finally. He raised his sword as so many others did. Even the aliens reacted to this as their lanky arms stretched out while more tentacles began to sprout from their mouths. They all stretched closer, some ran, others lunged, and it had seemed like Ben and Naruto would be attacked from all sides. But a quick smirk from Naruto had shown what he was thinking. Although the knights and aliens didn't see it, he knew he was safe. Pink energy soon swirled around them like a barrier with a lively glow. Everyone that had moved closer were suddenly blown back as the pink shield shifted out and then back in. Nice one, Gwen, expressed Naruto as he looked forward. When Ben looked to where his cousin was he could see her giving a similar smile to the blonde's grin. The actions had made him want to grin as well. For some reason being on Naruto's side had felt as if they couldn't lose this fight. Well then, let's begin, roared the whiskered boy with a laugh. His voice enveloped his enemies before he went through hand signs at unreadable speeds. This confused everyone just a bit as they heard the shuffling of his fingers in the air, the only thing that had stopped the silence at all. But then the shuffling stopped, and it was replaced with the shake of earth. The ground began to rumble, shaking up everyone who stood on it. Even Ben and Gwen almost fell from the force before a boom was heard, and now, circulating Naruto and Ben, was a dragon made of earth. it was snake-like as its horns stretched through the night sky, the light of stars gleamed upon it as it shifted with Naruto's grin. Ben widened his eyes suddenly. He had seen the blonde's strength against the knights, but a dragon made from the earth below them was just unreal for him. He would have been stunned again if the dragon didn't start moving to attack the knights and aliens among them. Gwen wasn't any better, as the pink energy on her hands began to shift in and out of existence. Since when could he do that? The girl uttered under her breath as she tried to focus herself from her surprise. The earth dragon rushed at the blonde's enemies with minimal speed, fast enough to reach the target without them dodging, but slow enough to not seriously hurt them as Naruto wanted them ready for capture. Gwen and Ben took this as a sign to attack, while Gwen used her height to send bursts of energy flying down. Ben did close-range attacks on one enemy at a time. Gwen made sure to keep Ben covered from other enemies as he took down many, and not one of their attackers could reach them as she kept up her bolts to keep them back. Eventually, as Naruto's dragon faded back into the earth, he wasted no time, launching himself straight into the cluster of knights. Mid-air, he pulled his leg back, aiming a powerful kick toward one knight's chest. The impact rang out with a heavy thud as the knight toppled, sending a ripple of fear through the remaining group. Metal clanged and swords sliced through the air, while a hum of laser lances added a deadly buzz to the battlefield. Yet Naruto barely flinched, his sharp gaze zeroing in on his next target. He sprang into motion, closing the distance in a heartbeat. With a twist and a swift spin, Naruto brought his foot crashing into another knight's side, denting the armor like it was tin foil and sending him sprawling into a cluster of his comrades. Dust erupted from the impact, and for a split second, Naruto paused, smirking at the mess he'd made, until a bright red laser shot past his face. Narrowly missing him, Naruto turned, his eyes locking onto a line of knights, all armed with laser lances. "Alright, guess they're getting serious," he muttered, a grin creeping onto his face as he dodged each shot with fluid, acrobatic flips and twists, never letting a single laser touch him. He noted the firing pattern, his Rinna Sharingan glowing to life, revealing every movement and timing with eerie clarity. Everything felt slow, each laser tracing a clear path he could avoid without breaking a sweat. Now. My turn, he thought, landing softly and clutching a kunai in his left hand, its familiar weight sparking a quick flash of his past. In one smooth motion, he leapt high, spinning mid-air as he let the kunai fly with precision honed from years of practice. The kunai whistled sharply through the air, and Naruto smirked, already bracing for his next move. Once the blonde landed, he sprinted towards the group of knights. Lasers rushed towards him, but like before, he had dodged them with ease. Only now he was covering ground as fast as he could to take down the rest of his assailants. His smirk didn't fade as he did a hard dive to dodge a laser that was aimed at his face. He then had to do a twist to dodge the next. More lasers of bright red narrowly missed him, and without falter he had closed the gap in an instant. The blonde pushed off his left foot as a final act to get closer. He dodged a couple more red beams that would flash past him and hit two crates behind him. The crates exploded in a fiery blaze. The explosion was bright, and as red as the lasers were, followed by a loud boom, as well as a shockwave that forced past Naruto and the knights. It was almost beautiful in its intense red and destruction, a sense of a phoenix, almost as if something would come from the crate's ashes. But it was too late for the knights to watch such a thing, as now they would be at the mercy of the last shinobi. The blonde didn't even lose his smirk at the sounds of explosions behind him, although the boy's eyes did glint with a bit of red before he had brought out some more kunai, so closely similar to the first he threw, but different in the fact they had 3 prongs instead of only 1. Naruto crossed his arms with a bit of silent speed, as if to charge an attack. Not a sound was made before the whiskered boy let the projectiles fly. He launched his arms out quickly, letting each kunai go at a precise time, putting them in different paths. And just like that, the shine of metal was seen in the dark sky. It was visibly brighter than the metal armor the knights had on, and as they flew they released sounds of sharp whistles, more chaotic than the first kunai, as the sound was being generated by all of the projectiles at the same time. While Naruto didn't see panic in the knights, he knew it was there. He could tell as some tried to shuffle to get away from the maelstrom of attacks, while others had frozen, whether out of fear or anticipation he didn't know. Not long after did the blonde disappear in a yellow flash, the same one his father had used in his famous technique, the same one he would be using right now in respect of the man. The kunai all closed around Naruto's enemies, and in a split second they were taken down in a couple of flashes, and sounds of clashing metal filled the air in those seconds, although no one had seen what happened in those bright sun-like flashes, and once it was over, Naruto stood in a pile of downed knights. That was too easy, the blonde said with a grin. He looked to each downed knight with a proud expression. This was before a laser lance flew past him. It wasn't even just a red laser, it was the whole lance, and it flew from the ground to just out of the boy's sight. The boy's once proud expression dropped, replaced with a concerned look as he stared at where the laser lance flew from. His eyes narrowed in anticipation as he crouched towards the downed bodies. Not long after did another laser lance fly past him. The sudden action made him jump back a bit as his eyes widened. What's going on? He thought silently as another lance soon followed the first two. A calculating look was plastered on the blonde as all the lances that were once in use by knights flew past him. It seemed it was always something going wrong for the blonde boy, whether it was losing Max Tennyson, getting ambushed, or even relentless enemies. He felt as if some god was playing with him up there, or maybe it was a random alien species. At this point it wouldn't be out of the ordinary. The blonde then shook his head, getting his annoyed thoughts out before standing back in his low battle stance. He knew whatever was going on now, he needed to be ready, no matter what. But as soon as he had this last thought, he rushed out of his stance to give a final surprised look as he turned. "Oh come on," Naruto roared as his arms dropped from annoyance. The whiskered boy was met with another problem. Set dead in front of the blonde was a knight standing well with some sort of small device in his hands, and floating around him were the laser lances that had just made a big scene. "Hey," Naruto yelled out to get the man's attention, not wanting him to get any ideas about running. "You better hand over those lances," he said in a serious tone, his eyes narrowing with each words as he began to put up one arm, "or you will regret it." However, Naruto's words had the opposite effect, and the knight ended up running off with the dangerous weapons. A deadpan look plastered on the boy's face. He then ran after the slow knight, ready to get this over with, although the chase didn't end well for the last shinobi. Somehow the knight was able to get in his group's truck. Not only that, the bucket head was also able to make off with a bunch of the laser lances, as well as some more lances that were still in their cases. The boy was still able to get a tracker on the truck, but he would have to talk with his team first before doing a single thing, which wasn't all bad. He would like to know exactly how they did on their side when dealing with the aliens. He really hoped they had a better time than he did. The blonde walked towards Ben and Gwen. Both stood above a singular body whilst not paying attention to the shinobi. Naruto narrowed his eyes in a bit of wonder, keeping his steps short before standing over his team. Once he was behind the two, he was able to see who exactly they had been watching. Unexpectedly, it was Kevin, the same broker of the deal that was meant to lead them to Max, now knocked out, eyes shut, without his case of money, and laying unconscious on the floor. The blonde would wonder exactly what happened later, but for now, he had some questioning to do. As soon as the black-haired teen woke up, time skip, the teen still stood in the same, destroyed, and sewer-smelling factory. Around all the shipping containers. They were mainly hidden from the rest of the carnage that had happened in their battle, while also standing together above Kevin, who had been knocked out by Ben. "So let me get this straight," Naruto started, his voice strained as his arms crossed to recall what the cousins had told him. Ben was all good until the alien started to spit at him. The blonde's voice raised a bit in disgust and wonder as he turned to Ben. Not long after did the boy give a nod with a similar look. The blonde then shifted back to Kevin with his look turning bored. "Well, that must have been fun," he said jokingly. I still don't get this Omnitrix turning into a new Omnitrix part though. At this Ben showed his new watch off with a serious look. Unlike the one he held 2 seconds ago, the watch had changed, as the boy told, into a thinner green watch. One thing that was still similar to the older one was the fact it still had the round dial and hourglass symbol. The brunette felt a feeling close to happiness at the fact the thing was finally working, even if that meant he didn't have any of his old aliens. It just meant he would need to work with this version more, and once he got it down he would be a lot of help to Gwen and Grandpa Max. Well, at least it's finally working for you, Benji, Naruto said mockingly as he inspected the Omnitrix with his hand on his chin. Yeah, Ben started before putting his arm down. Although I don't have any of my original aliens, it's gonna take me a while to get used to these new guys. Gwen gave a small smile. She looked down to the ground as her eyes softened a bit. Well, me and Naruto will help you. We are a team after all, she said calmly, to which Ben gave a thankful nod while Naruto turned away after a few seconds. The blonde then turned to the still unconscious Kevin. His look turned serious before he began to speak. We still got to deal with him, the boy said as he shifted a bit. He then laid back on the shipping container behind him, still keeping a close watch on Kevin. I still don't get why Kevin was the broker, Naruto said, his voice sharpening at the thought. What is there not to get? Ben said with bored expression as he looked at Kevin. Ben's right, Gwen said absently, losing her soft look in an instant. The guy had tried to kill Ben multiple times. Helping out a deal with illegal weapons involved doesn't seem that far-fetched for him, she added as if recalling all that he has done. Naruto shifted once more, his look now becoming more calculated. He then pushed away from the container, instead wanting to look to see if there was anything he was missing about the team that seemed to be his age. I get all of that, but there is still something we are missing. Did you see how he had looked when the knights and aliens revealed themselves? Asked Naruto cautiously. Forever Knights, expressed Ben blankly as he interrupted, letting the blonde know that they had a name. Forever Knights, Naruto quickly repeated, losing his calculating look for a second. The blonde then turned to Ben and Gwen, letting his arms fall into the pockets of his cloak. Anyway, he was surprised by them both. It seemed like there was a lot he didn't know. So what we need to figure out, the boy paused abruptly before turning back to Kevin, is how much he does know. A tense feeling filled the air as they thought on the obvious. Aside from the tracker Naruto had placed on the Forever Knights truck, Kevin was their only lead, and with no idea of what they would be going into if they followed Naruto's tracker, they really needed some extra information. For Naruto it had felt as if he had been slowly losing control. Sure, he had eyes on small pictures, and he didn't let them out of his sight just in case they would be part of something big, but that was it. He didn't have any other parts of the puzzle, and he wouldn't go into this mission blind. Not again. Kevin soon began to stir, the sounds of his groans quickly reaching the ears of the three, pulling them from their thoughts. A bit of shuffling was made by the boy as well, until he had shifted up and opened his eyes groggily. He then looked to his hands, connected by 2 balls of blue energy. They sparked and glowed with color, even somewhat warming his skin. It didn't take 2 seconds for the boy to try and break out of the cuffs, but it was for nothing, as when he grit his teeth and tried with all of his strength they just didn't budge. The black-haired boy stopped abruptly. He then looked up to Naruto, who had been right in front of him, with a smirk. A blank look covered Kevin's features as he just stared at the blonde who had captured him. If you're wondering, those are energy cuffs. Ben told me about your powers, and luckily I had something that you couldn't absorb. Can't osmose something that isn't there. The smug-sounding voice made Kevin narrow his eyes in silence. Those same eyes then shifted towards Ben, then Gwen, and then finally back to Naruto. Anyway, we need some information, Naruto said with interest in his voice. He inched backward blankly as he closely watched Kevin. Your friends made off with the laser lances, added the blonde. It would help us out with our case if you tell us what you know about both sides. Kevin raised an eyebrow. He then turned to Ben, dismissing Naruto in a quick instant. Hey Tennyson, who is this guy? Your lackey, he seems new. Ben would have laughed if this was the time, but instead he looked towards Kevin with a serious tone. His name is Naruto, he's a plumber that worked with my grandpa, and me and Gwen joined him to find him. Kevin turned back to Naruto, still a bit dismissive of his power, which didn't go unnoticed to the blonde. Instead the whiskered boy just gave a sigh before his look hardened again. The two ended up staring at each other, wanting very much to see who would back down first. To Naruto it was clear this was the only way he would get Kevin to speak on anything. Both teens' eyes narrowed, their gazes fixed on each other, neither backed down as Ben and Gwen watched. This was taking too long for the blonde. Every minute they spent here felt like sand slipping through his fingers. Max was still out there somewhere, and for all he knew, he could be running out of time. His fists clenched at the thought. He couldn't let Ben or Gwen down, no, he couldn't let the world down. He shot a glance at Ben and Gwen, both determined, both ready. They trusted him to help find their family. He couldn't afford mistakes here. He took a deep breath, letting the frustration melt into focus. His focus was mirrored by Kevin, although the similarities didn't stop there, and soon Naruto had noticed such a thing as well. The same feeling of lost control in the boy's eyes, the same feeling that would consume him if he hadn't kept as cool all this time. That feeling reminded him of himself. It seemed that having been taken advantage of, Kevin wasn't having the best day either. The blonde also saw no information to be taken from the black-haired teen. Soon Naruto stopped his hard gaze, instead now carrying a small grin. You don't have any information, do you? That got everyone to stop. Even Kevin's glare faltered as now Ben and Gwen began to question the two. What do you mean? Questioned Gwen as she looked to the blonde. She then looked back at Kevin with a confused look. He was the broker, right? She continued. Shouldn't he have some information? The girl's confused look stayed true. She had no idea what she was missing and exactly what Naruto was seeing. She wondered on it for a bit while keeping close watch on Kevin. Naruto didn't falter in his stand. He took his hands out from his pockets before turning to Ben and Gwen. He doesn't have any information, I can see it in his eyes. Naruto turned back to Kevin, now fully understanding him. If he had any info, he'd probably be going after the Forever Knights or aliens himself. Kevin's once powerful glare finally fizzled out. The black-haired boy now looked away from the group as it began to become clear what Naruto said was true. So how about you help us instead? Naruto's voice turned kind as he crossed his arms. Everyone now turned to him in more surprise than before. With widened eyes Gwen walked closer to Naruto, glancing back to Kevin and Ben every so often. There is no way you're serious, right? Questioned the girl as her voice faltered. I mean, you remember what I told you about him, right? She continued apprehensively, turning back to Kevin with a small glare. Ben moved towards Naruto as well. He frowned a bit while looking towards Kevin before turning back to his team. And how do you go from interrogation to recruitment so fast? Added the boy. To this, Naruto gave a shrug. He then turned back to Kevin, ignoring the two, waiting for an answer from his fellow teen. So, what's your answer? Naruto asked, his grin widening. As he spoke, Kevin paused. He had history with Ben, a bad one, but right now he really just wanted to get his money, and a bit of payback. He could guess if he sticker with the group of misguided geeks for a bit, he would eventually find both, and losing control over his deal wasn't something he would forget. He would never lose control again. Kevin looked back up at Naruto. He then gave a smirk. A confident one like he had at the start of his deal, one that contrasted Naruto's grin. I'm in. The black-haired boy said shortly, his calm tone unlike the ideas of revenge he had in his head. Ben and Gwen still had worried looks at the idea. Even while looking down at Kevin, they realized the much less trusted the black-haired teen than they did Naruto at first. In one last chance the two cousins turned back to Naruto, still apprehensive of the blonde's decision. Are you sure? Questioned Gwen calmly. Naruto soon lost his grin before nodding to the two. He didn't want them to think he was doing this out of desperation, and right now they needed all the help they could get, and they would get more information from going to the Forever Knights anyway. With the finale answer of the blonde, Ben and Gwen looked to each other solemnly. They still hadn't been close to finding Grandpa Max, and yet, they had to see all of this through, so even with their past with Kevin they had to push through. After loading into Kevin's car in a tense, silent drive through Bellwood's backstreets, they finally arrived at the Forever Night Base Castle looming against the night sky, its stone walls worn and foreboding. In the dark night, the castle of the Forever Knights seemed a bit worn down. If compared to any other castle in the world it would be small, a big fortress no doubt, but kinda sickly when seen on the outside. "You sure this is the place?" expressed Ben when walking towards the castle. He looked up with a small gape before looking back to Kevin's car. "This is definitely it," answered Naruto. He moved away from Kevin's car and was followed by the black-haired boy and Gwen not long after. "Although, it's kinda on the nose," added the blonde before tilting his head with a smirk. The group stared at the castle, Ben with a bit of indifference, Gwen with a small frown before crossing her arms. Kevin had a similar frown, only it seemed more focused. And Naruto kept his small smirk as he shifted his hands into his pockets. Gwen shifted a bit, letting her arms drop before looking to Ben and Kevin, until finally turning to Naruto. "So, what are we going to do now?" asked the girl as her eyes shone a bit of concern. Naruto could tell that the girl was still a bit wary of working with Kevin. It was easy to see as the girl was on guard ever since they got in the black-haired teen's car, but he could also tell this would all blow over, and if he was right about his suspension of the mission, it would take the rest of the school year, maybe even summer to finish, which meant Kevin, Ben and Gwen would be working together a lot more than wanted. Naruto walked closer to the castle, seemingly ignoring Gwen's words as he kept his stride, his fist clenched in his cloak before softening. The blonde then turned back to his team with a smirk. "Now, we go in, and find our answers, although, try to be quiet." The confident words reached to the three, making Gwen have a small smile. While Ben and Kevin gained grins eerily similar to Naruto's, Ben quickly ran towards the blonde, making small crunches in the grass with each step. Gwen and Kevin instead just took a few short strides to get next to Naruto. As they crept towards the looming castle, the air felt heavier, as if something was going to close in on them. They quickly made their way in, and the heavy pressure hadn't changed. Shadows stretched in the dark castle. The only thing allowing them to see was a bit of moonlight that peered down from the skylight. The castle's silence was almost smothering, with only the team's footsteps being punctuated with faint creaks, and a slight draft could be felt on the skin of each teen. The main part of the castle they were in had a red carpet leading to the back, in a wide open space leading to more darkness. On the side of the carpet was stands that held probably very expensive things, such as glass vases with intricate designs, a few swords that looked similar to what the Forever Knights had used to attack Naruto. Many other things had been on the sides of the walls as well, mainly old-timey decorations, or jewelry, and of course, more swords. Kevin eventually stopped at one of the pedestals. He looked down with a smirk as he watched the moonlight shine on the necklace. The piece of jewelry twinkled as the black-haired boy thought of how much it had cost. He then picked it up, feeling the smooth crystals embedded in the thing, their cold touch only making his eyes glimmer while thinking on how much it would be worth to seek. The silver on the thing also shined and made the boy want it more. Before he could put the thing in his pocket he had turned sharply to find Ben standing in front of him. The brunette had his arms crossed as he gave a blank "Are you serious?" look. Without a change in his smirk he quickly decided to ask what was on his mind. "How much do you think this stuff cost?" Ben quickly raised an eyebrow before speaking. "We aren't taking anything from these guys, we are just here for the lances and information." Kevin's greedy smirk turned into a frown. He then looked back at the jewelry before looking back to Ben with a more annoyed frown. "Why not?" he asked with blank tone, underlined with a bit of annoyance. "Because, we don't steal, put it back," Ben quickly responded with a reprimanding tone, his brow furrowing as the tension that had already been between the two began to pulse. Kevin stepped closer to the brunette, his anger rising, about to bubble over like a volcano. He let the arm that was holding the jewelry drop and clench. and with one last step he uttered angrily, "Why not?" Ben began to raise his left arm, the same arm that had his new Omnitrix on it, and as both began to stare at each other a green glow began to come from it, making the tension and anger between the two grow even more. Both would have broke out in a fight at any second, if Naruto hadn't sharply turned to the two with a serious disappointed look. "Can you two shut up and put away the necklace? We're going in blind here, so you two need to stay quiet." Naruto's voice stretched to the two firmly, its commanding tone reducing the boys to a nod, and with that the blonde's serious look turned back to the darkness as he walked forward with Gwen. Ben and Kevin looked to the two, both with strained frowns. Kevin eventually put the necklace back before turning to Ben still with the same look. "Who died and made him the leader?" Kevin asked genuinely, being annoyed by how he was ordered around and actually listened. The question wasn't answered before the two had caught up with the shinobi, and as they walked, Kevin began to mutter under his breath, "Seriously though, I don't know why we can't just take a bit, they have enough," said Kevin still holding his frown. Ben just gave him an annoyed glance before whispering to the boy, hoping they wouldn't be heard, "Because we aren't here to shop around, Kevin," the brunette said quickly. "Seriously, can you get that through your thick skull, or are you absorbing a rock and just not listening?" Kevin sharply turned to Ben at that. Both still kept their strides, but like before now they were glaring at each other. "Look who's talking, Tennyson. I'd be surprised with all the aliens that you got in that thing, you still don't have one that can fix your idiotic nature." Kevin's voice was now above a whisper, his fist clenched as the two "Now we back to arguing. Can you two just shut up?" yelled Naruto as softly as he could, still not trying to alert anyone or anything as the looming presence of watchful eyes. "You're gonna botch the mission if you guys can't get along," he continued, the annoyance in his voice becoming sharp. "We are all here for different reasons, but we are here together, so please, just get along." This quickly shut the two up with a bit of shock. It had also shocked Gwen, but she was unable to say anything before the blonde turned back to the shadows and walked forward. Naruto kept himself as calm as he could be when dealing with the two. He was patient with the bickering all the way here, but seeing them act like children had made him snap out, especially in this situation. He never expected to be the one to lead, or even be the one to have to stop the fights and be the responsible one, and the team has only been together for an hour at the most, and they acted like this. The whiskered blonde didn't like it one bit, but he probably was the only influence right now to push them in the right direction, as well as to keep them from tearing each other apart. Naruto looked forward, scanning for anything every so often. His body was tense, his fist clenched, and he began to look towards each shadow, as if it was a hiding spot for prying eyes. The boy's nerves were on edge at this, although he hid it well enough to not cause alert to Ben and the others. His gaze was tracking every flicker and shadow. But now, as the last thought left Naruto's mind, it was there, the one whose eyes had been on the team ever since they stepped in, the feeling of a powerful presence finally being realized. As the four just looked up towards the thing, the group looked towards a tall dragon, Naruto with a glare, Gwen and Ben with awe, and Kevin with a bored look that screamed he would have liked to stay in his car. The dragon had no resemblance to the one Naruto had made out of earth. Instead it was like ones you would see in most silver-aged myths, with arms and legs like a lizard, but long and scaly wings on its back. Its wingspan was large, and its head held horns that seemed basic at best. Its hands were tipped with sharp black claws, that seemed to mix with the darkness of the castle, and as the four kept staring, they could even see the warm air coming from its breath. A slight flicker of fire came from its maw, reminding Naruto of the flicker that had been in the darkness before, and now, each of them didn't know exactly what they would do. "What now, fearless leader?" yelled Kevin, having a sarcastic tone as the dragon shifted towards them at a slow pace. Naruto grit his teeth a bit, not expecting to see a dragon when coming to the Forever Knights, but for them it shouldn't be that hard to deal with, right? Naruto began to size up the massive dragon before them. He couldn't help but let out a small sigh. mentally preparing himself. This wasn't what he had anticipated when entering a supposedly human stronghold, but there was no time to dwell on the oddities. He had a team that was counting on him, even if Kevin wasn't fully cooperative. "Alright, listen up," Naruto muttered, keeping his voice low so the dragon wouldn't hear, wanting to keep that fact true. "It hasn't noticed us yet," he continued as it advanced. "Ben-Gwen, I need you two to stay mobile, and avoid any direct hits. Kevin, think you can absorb something around here? We need a tank, just in case it gets wise about where we are." The dragon slowly advanced more as Naruto let his words longer. The three looked to him as they heard the chilling scrapes of its claws hitting the floor, and its low growls that left its maw and pulsed in its gut. Kevin was the first to move, rolling his eyes as he stepped forward and crouched to touch the ground. "Whatever you say, Blondie. Just don't get in my way." The black-haired boy's palm pressed against the hard rocky floor, his skin turning a rough and blank silver as he took on the granite-like properties. Ben and Gwen were next, staring to Naruto as he watched the beast closely, almost like the blonde was trying to analyze it, which, to be honest, wouldn't surprise the two. Ben flickered through the Omnitrix, considering what alien he could use in this situation. "Are we fighting head-on, or are we still doing your stealthy plan?" he said with some moxie as he tried to give a confident smirk. Naruto's gaze remained locked on the dragon as he began to strategize more. The basic plan was to take the monster down. But if they did it with some stealth, he could salvage a surprise attacks for any knights that had been inside. "We'll need a mix of both. See if you can find an alien to get behind the dragon. I know you don't know much about your new forms." Ben gave a quick nod before cycling through aliens as a green hologram appeared on top of the dial. "Gwen, once we attack we are going to need some shields. Do you have enough control to do what you did at the factory?" The girl gave a nod, her hands began to glow with some pink energy as she prepared herself. "I'm ready when you need me," she said with a focused look towards the dragon. Kevin finally got up from his crouch, positioning himself in front of the three before crossing his arms. He glanced towards the dragon with a cocky smirk, before pointing to it with a mock laugh. "What's the big problem anyway?" he said quickly. He then let his arm fall before punching the inside of his rocky palm. "Dragons are just overgrown lizard anyway." As soon as the words left his mouth, the group heard a low growl. The dragon had finally lifted its massive head and peered down at them, its yellow pupilless eyes staring right at them with a slight tech-like gleam. And almost with a cocky huff, smoke peered from its mouth. With a low growl, the monster lifted its massive tail with ease. It was clear they were spotted. "Go now," Naruto shouted quickly and firmly. As he grit his teeth, everyone quickly separated, Ben scrolling through the Omnitrix to find an alien, Gwen getting into a stance to concentrate on her energy, which quickly formed around her fist with a pink glow, and Kevin moved to the side, finding a podium and picking it up. The stone boy then rushed towards the dragon, hoisting the object on his shoulder as he picked up speed. Kevin then threw the podium at the dragon, only for the beast to slap it away before hitting the boy back with its tail, sending him flying past Naruto and the cousins. Kevin ended up in a pile of rubble. As he struggled to get out, his team looked towards him, but they quickly looked back to the dragon. Finally, in a flash of green light, Ben transformed. Once the glare subsided, the brunette was replaced by a red stingray-like alien, with clawed feet, a long pterodactyl-like wingspan, the height of Kevin, and glowing green eyes that seemed to have some form of green energy peering off of them. Ben quickly looked to himself, surprised by his new look for a second, but he quickly dismissed the new form. He had known he hadn't had any of his old aliens, but for some reason these new ones felt weird, almost as if their instincts had been implanted in his brain. Ben began to flap his new wings. Gusts of dust and dirt began to build up from the flapping, until the boy finally ended up in the air. Without a second thought, he zoomed around the dragon, gaining its attention in an instant. "Hey, big, scaly and ugly, bet you can't hit me," Ben said with a smirk, before green lasers shot from his eyes. The lasers were quick and bright, but they hadn't had any effect on the dragon. Instead, Ben had a small moment of confusion from his instincts before continuing his attacks. Naruto's eyes narrowed in focus, having seen Ben's lasers having no effect on the dragon, but he had also noticed how the boy was able to take all the attention from Kevin and place it on himself. Maybe he could use that to do some long-ranged attacks. The blonde quickly looked to Gwen before pulling up 3 of his normal kunai. The girl looked to the sharp metal with a serious look before giving a nod, understanding the boy's idea in an instant. Naruto pulled out more kunai in his left hand, as Gwen began to charge up pink energy orbs around her hands, and after a few seconds, both attacks were ready to be launched. The kunai and pink bolts flew directly towards the monster right as Ben was flying around it, with the projectiles grew in speed, causing a small whistle to be made as they soared, and after a few seconds they met their mark with a thud. While Gwen's projectiles exploded, Naruto's kunai had stuck into the thing like butter, which confused the blonde a bit. It wasn't because of how easy his blades had made their mark, no. That was never a surprise with the training he put himself through after being found by Azimuth. The problem was there was no blood. Now while Naruto didn't see himself as an expert on aliens, he knew that most beings around this sector of the universe had blood and veins, most that is. There were some outliers like ectonurites. That wasn't the point was there was nothing coming out of the wounds of the beast. The dragon still happened to be flailing its claws and wings at Ben to attack him. It also didn't seem to notice the blades that were sticking out of it, which raised many questions for the boy. Not long after these thoughts came, Kevin had finally gotten out of the rubble. He used his hands to push the hard rocks off of him, and with crashes of dust he got up from his lay. The black-haired teen dusted himself off, before having become rock-like again. Kevin gave a glare towards the suspicious dragon, and with gritted teeth he began to approach it again. "That's the last time a lizard gets a good hit on me," said the boy with a clear grumble. With those few words, Kevin had made to rush at the dragon once more. In only a few quick and powerful strides, accented by hard-sounding thuds on the floor, as well as kicked-up dust, did Kevin get to his target. He then launched himself towards the dragon, reaching heights that would be impossible for any human. "Hey lizard face, take this," he shouted angrily, still giving a glare before swinging his arm forward mid-air. Meeting the attack head-on was the dragon's tail. It was swung like a bat with the short turn of its body, and like a 2 hammers clashing, they clanked together. The sound of the impact was audible, loud and forceful on both sides, as if rock was hitting metal, and Kevin's attack caused shockwaves that reached Gwen and Naruto. Both Kevin and the dragon's tail clashed with multiple hits on both sides, until they landed on their last one, holding each other back with power and strength to take down the other, but neither had made any way. Unfortunately, the clash of forces didn't last long, and soon the boy was batted away with the same tail, back into the rubble with a thud. Naruto narrowed his eyes at this, before looking back to the dragon as quickly as he could, but the dragon didn't stop there. It had seemed tired of letting the attacks come at it instead of dishing any out. The dragon quickly began to shift into a hard stance, one that Naruto noticed was mainly based on balance. Now the thing wasn't paying the shape-shifter any mind, even though Ben was still flying around it, trying to gain its attention with his lasers. Heaps of smoke began to bellow out of the monster's maw. A hard smell of gas and coal filled the air. As the room's pressure began to harden, it even became warmer as more smoke came from the dragon. Warm soon turned to hot, and hot soon turned to burning, as now there were visible flames and sparks coming from the dragon, and not too long after did the dragon release a powerful roar. It was one that sounded almost unrealistic, but somehow still flowing horridly. The heat almost burnt on Naruto's skin, and the roar had been deafening to his ears. The sound seemed to shock and freeze the team as its whole body shifted forward, now having its body low and directly in front of Naruto and Gwen, and with the roar came red flames. A stream of fire spewed from the dragon's mouth with quick succession. The flame stretched out to the walls, and was as high as the roof, leaving no way for anyone to leave the attack. The heat closed in, making the air hotter than it already was, almost as if it could burn anything on contact, and in only a few seconds, the flames were right in front of Gwen and Naruto. The blonde gave a look to Gwen, signaling her to begin. She gave another quick nod before standing in front of him, and stretching out one of her hands. Pink energy sparked to life around her fingertips, and then her whole hand had the same pink energy on it, and after that, there was a barrier of the energy built in front of them. The barrier was made to be as big as the flames, and it was able to stop them in an instant, making sure they didn't go further. Once the barrier was down, so were the flames, making the dragon and Ben go back at it before Gwen turned to Naruto. "So what are we going to do?" she said as she ran towards Naruto again, deciding to stand next to him while she was charging up some more bolts to throw at the thing. "As far as I could tell, the dragon has no weaknesses." Naruto gave a slight look to her before she had thrown the bolts at the dragon. He then looked back to the beast looking for any scratch on it besides his kunai. They had seemed to cut through it, but they hadn't seemed to affect it much. Besides that, Naruto felt something had been off about the dragon, a beast like this, that had no business living on Earth. And no attack seemed to be making it flinch, but its skin still seemed to be damaged. Was it a ploy, something to deter others from attacking, to make everyone think there was no point in attacking because of how it acted? The sounds of battle raged on as the boy thought on this. He looked up one more time, looking for anything that could tell him how to bring the thing down. Naruto kept looking until something had caught his eye. Its tail. It had been more damaged than any other part of it, with scratches, deep gashes, and even, wait, those were sparks. And the closer Naruto looked, he saw things that shouldn't be in something organic. Sure, he may have found the dragon's weak spot, but that was small compared to the revelation that he had found. Sparks, wires, metal chunks, even some small glowing was able to be seen coming from its tail. It had been clear now. The thing was a robot, or at least mechanical to a point. Naruto finally looked back to Gwen with a confident smirk, having figured out exactly what he needed to do. "Gwen, cover me when I run, I finally figured it out." Gwen gave a small smirk at this before giving a nod. She was glad the blonde had finally found what he needed. She didn't know how much longer she would have been able to send out bolts of energy. Naruto quickly rushed in, with his eyes locked on the tail of the dragon. He let his arms flow back, taking a run similar to most shinobis of the past. The footsteps echoed softly on the floor, quick and silent, to the point Gwen wouldn't have heard them if she wasn't watching. In a short second the boy rushed his arms in front of him, forming a familiar hand seal of his favorite jutsu. The familiar feeling of his warm chakra filled his chest, before stretching to his arms and then his hands. Soon the boy's energy flared, and in a puff of white smoke, two other identical Narutos appeared. Gwen's eyes had widened at the display. She remembered the Earth Dragon from before, but making two clones out of thin air was just not something she expected. Not even from Naruto, who had been unpredictable since the very beginning. She even knew that Ben and Kevin's eyes would have widened as well if they had seen the blonde's newest ability shown. Now with his clones, Naruto ran faster, closing the distance between him and the dragon without fail. But as he did so, the monster's foot appeared above him. A looming shadow had suddenly enclosed the blonde and his clones, and it was becoming smaller as the foot came closer. But as it seemed like the dragon was going to crush the blonde, multiple bolts of pink energy came to blast back the foot. This allowed Naruto to go on. Him and his clones made different hand signs as they ran towards the dragon. "I got this," he thought as his clones spewed out streams of high-pressured water, contrasting the flames with their cold and fast propulsion. The attacks hit dead onto their mark, slamming into the metal tail in a quick second. The pressurized water began to tear through the tail, causing the air to cool as it sprinkled. This carried on until it completely teared through the tail of the dragon, revealing even more tech to the outside. The sudden imbalance from losing its tail caused the dragon to fall back, letting its arms reach the sky as it began to drop. The air shifted away from the dragon, along with dust that began to fly high from the sudden rushing winds. And finally, the thing was down. A loud bang filled the air as it crashed. the sound having stretched even further than expected, even causing Gwen to cover her ears. It had been over, almost as quickly as it began. Gwen, Ben and Kevin soon appeared next to Naruto as his clones disappeared, all now looking at the dragon without a word. To continue, you could explore the aftermath of the fight and set up a moment for character reflection or hint at the next challenge. Here's a suggestion for the following scene. As the dust settled around the fallen dragon, Naruto, Gwen, Ben, and Kevin slowly stepped closer to inspect the massive metal creature. Its once intimidating form now lay motionless, sparks flickering from exposed circuits and damaged panels. Ben glanced at Gwen, a proud smirk tugging at his lips. "Guess we showed that lizard what teamwork looks like." Gwen returned the smile but looked back at the dragon's mechanical remains thoughtfully. "But who would make something like this? And why send it after us?" Naruto touched his fingers to his chin, glancing around the room as if expecting answers to emerge from the shadows. "I think it's obvious, the Forever Knights had this thing guarding the place." Kevin, who had been silent until now, let out a low grumble. "Yeah, but why send a metal dragon instead of coming after us themselves? Someone's playing games, and I don't like it." Naruto's expression shifted to one of focus, eyes narrowing as he surveyed the surroundings. "Kevin, I think that's just it, they did come at us themselves." As if on cue, a distant rumble echoed from mech-turned rubble. Steam started to bellow from its chest, as if exhaling a great bit. Once the steam subsided, the chest of the monster opened up, exposing a compartment to the castle and teens. All of them looked to the thing with a bit of intrigue. However, Naruto was the only one to start scaling the mech to figure out more of the story. He was tired of the story having no pieces. Today was one of the worst days for a mission like this, and it had taken all night. He would be getting his info if it was that last thing he did. And he guessed he wouldn't have to wait any longer for that to happen. Naruto now stood tall on top of the giant metal dragon, fist clenched and his glare unforgiving as he peered into the opening. He looked down closely as some steam still wafted out. The inside was capsule-like, with glowing buttons, and screens that seemed to be too advanced for Earth, just like the lances, and amidst all the tech, was one Forever Knight. With a quick motion Naruto pulled the armored man out of his lay. Not yet ready to forgive all their trouble as he kept his glare now fixed on the knight, the dragon's clear puppeteer, Naruto clenched onto the metal armor the man was wearing, letting it bend and contort like plastic. "Just like I thought," he said shortly, "you were the one attacking us, just from inside that thing, and it doesn't seem like any of your buddies are here. I began to notice that as soon as we came in. Sure, there was your presence that overwhelmed this place, not allowing me to sense anything else, but now, I can tell, you're here all by yourself." Naruto's eyes shifted to his purple Reni Sharingan, glowing intimidatingly as he stared into the eyes of the knight. "And you're not getting away with those flames you spewed out, or the lances you and your buddies stole. You're gonna tell me and my team everything you know." That's the end of part 2, hoped you liked it, and I hope you subscribe. All Kage, out.